Today's paper that we're here to share with you is a paper on the impact of free-range poultry production systems on animal health, human health, productivity, the environment, food safety, and animal welfare issues. And this paper was put together by a task force of scientists, subject matter experts, led by two co-chairs, both from the University of Kentucky, Dr. Jacquie Jacobs, who was with us this morning, and now this afternoon, Dr. Tony Pescatore. Tony's going to share kind of the highlights and the key findings. A little bit of background. He is a poultry extension. He is an extension professor at the Department of Animal and Food Science at the University of Kentucky, specializing in poultry. In addition to his extension program, he has a strong applied research program focusing on the impact of poultry production on the environment, nutritional modifications to reduce its impact. He received his Bachelor of Science, Master of Science degrees from Michigan State University, a PhD from Texas A&M University, and an MBA from Wilmington College. And so we're very pleased to have Tony with us to share the highlights and the key findings of the paper. So, Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you coming this afternoon. And we want to talk a little bit about this paper. And the task force that put this paper together included myself and Dr. Jacobs at the University of Kentucky, Dr. Ken Anderson from North Carolina State University, Dr. Bridget McRae from Auburn University, Dr. Daniel Shaw from the University of Missouri. The reviewers for this paper included Annie Donahue, who was with USDA ARS in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Jody Purswell, who is with USDA ARS at Mississippi State, and Hongwei Shi, who's with Iowa State University. And the cast liaison was Mike Hewlett, who is with Pennsylvania State University. So what we're going to talk about today, the outline we're going to use is we're going to give you an introduction, give you some terminology so that we're all talking the same language, look at animal welfare, food quality, food safety, poultry health, and the environmental impact, and end with our conclusions. Well, when you look at poultry production over the years, it's been very efficient. And part of the efficiency is due to genetics, or mostly with genetics, as well as improvements in nutrition. But also what improved production was when we brought the birds inside. We were able to control their environment, we were able to protect the animals, so we did get an improvement from that. And we've had major increases in egg production, feed efficiency, quicker growth on our meat chickens, and better feed efficiency. But what you're seeing across the United States over time has been the isolation or separation between the farming community and the general public. Only about less than 2% are involved directly in agriculture, and 98.4% are not. And there is a lot of interest from the public standpoint of understanding where their food comes from, what is being done with their food, and the quality of their food. And one of the issues that's come up is there's a great interest from the consumer side interested in free-range poultry production. And what the purpose of this paper was is to see if there are some benefits that generate reasons for this interest. So when we talk about these types of production systems, the first system we really have to look at is the conventional cage production. A cage is an enclosure with wired floor, 4 sides, a roof, and an access door. This is the primary method for egg production, with 84% of the hens in cages. We meet the physical needs of the animal by providing it feed and water. We separate the feces from the birds by being on wire, and the slope of the floor allows the egg to roll away from the hen, keeping it cleaner and not broken. Space size is somewhere between 67 and 86 square inches per bird. And I want to note that meat birds, whether it's broilers, which are meat chickens, or turkeys, are not raised in cages, so they are not part of this debate about cage-free or conventional cage production. When we start looking about two terms that are interchangeable is outdoor access and free range. First of all, outdoor access, there is no legal definition of outdoor access. And usually it refers to a production system that allows flocks to leave a stationary housing structure to go to the outside. That outside access may be continuous, or it can be specific times of the day or specific seasons, or it may be related to the age of the birds, such as an example of birds no younger than 3 weeks of age being allowed outside because of the need for supplemental heat. Free range is the same way. There's no legal definition. Production systems that allow flocks to go outside, but it could provide a structured shelter or a secured outdoor space may be provided or may not be provided. But in both those cases, outdoor access and free range, it doesn't specify the type of ground that they're on. With that in mind, there's lots of terms include pasture and pasture raised. These birds are kept outdoors, but the specific is that there is pasture, and that is the land is covered with grass, legumes, or other forages suitable for grazing livestock. The pasture may be specific for poultry. It may be a rotation for poultry after other livestock species, or it could be a mixed use where we have a crop livestock program where we harvest the forage crop. In this picture that is here, one of the ways that is popular to do pasture poultry is movable pens, which have no bottom on it, and you move those pens across the pasture, the birds utilize the pasture, and then move to a new spot. And it's one of the more popular ways to doing small type production. Cage-free and free roaming really mean the same. Basically, put it simply, they're not in cages. They could be raised on the floor and have access to some type of bedding material, or in the case of the lower picture, that could be an aviary system where the birds have access to multiple layers and they can move between layers or facilities. It's the key point is it's the ability to move throughout the house. Broilers and meat chickens and turkeys traditionally are not raised in cages. Their housing system would be very similar to what you see in the top picture. When we also have the term with free range, we start talking about natural and naturally raised. Naturally is a defined term. It means that there's no artificial ingredients, there's no added colors, and there's minimum processing. They're processed in a manner that does not fundamentally alter the product. So chicken that is processed or eggs that are stolen in the store can be classified as natural because we're not doing anything to them. One term that was around for a while is naturally raised. This is live animal production practices that fell under the Ag Marketing Service, and it was a voluntary marketing claim, but the USDA decided that they had not the ability to define that standard, so they suspended that terminology. Moving in with the free range is organic. Organic means that it's produced under the Organic Standards Rule. It's under constant, for poultry, it's continuous organic management beginning with the second day of life. All agricultural components of the feed ration must be 100% organic. Within the organic standards, there are no space requirements. There was a movement to put space requirements in the latest version of organic standards, but they could not come to agreement, so they dropped the space requirement. But the one thing that is common between organic and free range is the outside or outdoor access. So that's why you sometimes confuse the term free range and organic, is because of the outdoor access. All organic birds are free range, but not all free range birds are organic. And why are we in this problem, into this situation? With the first concern is animal welfare. Many perceived improved welfare with the free range production system. Looking at the animals on pasture or on outdoor access gives a feeling that their welfare is improved. However, when you go into the research and you start looking at it, you realize that animal welfare is very complicated. There's many conflicting information, and it's very controversial. So there is no clear animal welfare benefit, but at the same time, perception of it being more welfare for the birds is prevalent in the consumer. In Europe, they've developed computer models looking at different factors of animal welfare for laying hens. However, we do not have anything at that level for meat animals. So that's an area that's not very well known. But when we start dealing with animal welfare, what we really need to know is, what does welfare mean? Well, the first thing that when you talk about welfare is you start thinking about behavior. What behaviors do the animal need to express to have a welfare situation? Well, a study that was done with the red jungle fowl, which is the ancestor of our modern day chickens, they took those animals, they were exposed to having 100% of their feed needs met by other sources. However, those birds spent 94% of their time with foraging behaviors. They ground pecked and they scratched. So you would think that was a natural behavior in regards to them. But at the same time, they had adverse behaviors. They had feather picking, where they picked the feathers out of each other, and they had a tendency for cannibalism. And what they also showed is, when we start looking at these situations, they also had a response of piling up in regard to a threat. Another thing that people have used in the past for animal welfare is vocalization. People have come up with 30 different distinct patterns for chickens in vocalization. However, it's very strain dependent. In a group of studies, one strain showed when they were in a adverse situation, gave off an alarm call. The same situation in another strain gave a Jacquie call, which is more of a contented clucking sound. So it's very complex and very conflicting. When you start thinking about animal welfare, you also have to take into account the bird's health. Typically, there's higher mortality with the free-range production, averaging about 10%. Hens with outdoor access has been shown to have less plumage damage and reduced incidence of foot pad dermatitis compared with cage hens. And we also have an issue with laying hens with bone integrity. The laying hen, because there's a large demand for calcium on that bird, can experience osteoporosis. Access to the outside or free-range hens had improved bone integrity. However, that improved integrity is not enough to prevent fractures or keel bone deformities. And what is happening is, as the birds have more access for freedom to move, they have more chance of flying, and they have more chance of running into something. And they also, because they can fully extend their wings, they increase the velocity at which they fly and the velocity when they hit something. Another measure that people have looked at is physiological measurements. This could be change in heart rate, body temperature, respiratory rate, adrenal secretions, depressed immune function, are all classic measures of stress. And with these, there is no constant or consistent way of measuring animal welfare in the housing systems. Other methods for measuring stress included the corticosterone levels, the adrenal hormone levels. And when those are elevated, they can change the white blood cells that are circulating in the bird, and the ratio of specific cells, the heterophil and the lymphocyte, can change, which are two white blood cells. The use of this parameter has given conflicting results. They consistently show that there's a higher HL ratio found in birds that were raised in conventional cages compared to free-range hens, but the result is variable due to how the blood samples were taken and the handling of the birds. When we start thinking about welfare, we also will have to start thinking about needs and wants. And with the birds, when we were indoors in cages, we were meeting the birds' physical needs. Now, as we try to meet some of their required behavioral needs, we start having a balance. And one of the things we look at is how is stress done. We respond to stress the same way with the bird. We either are stressed because we are we're reacting to something we're trying to avoid, or we're stressed because we are unable to complete a behavior or meet a need that we have. So deprivation and aversion. By looking at that, one of the things that can be done is preference tests. And preference tests have been done on all types of components of the housing system, whether it's nest or watering system or feeding system or the flooring that they like, even the door that has the access to the outside. However, there is no consistent findings with that, and more likely is that when in controlled experiments, there are consistent findings. However, when these findings are transferred to the farm, it's not always consistently applied. One of the classic ones that's involved with welfare is the absence or presence of fear. And the way we measure fear in birds is called tonic immobility. We place the bird on its back and we see how long it takes for it to right itself. The longer it takes to right itself, the more fearful the bird is. So if it's quick on righting itself, doesn't have any fear. So laying hens on range show that the hens spend most of their time, that the hens that spend the most time outside show a decrease in fearfulness as indicated by reduced time of toxic immobility. Hens that spend less time outside have higher levels of fearfulness. And one could say the fact that they were outside reduced their fearfulness, or one could say they were outside because they were less fearful. So we don't know what's causing it, but there is a relationship on their ability to use the outside and the level of fearfulness those birds have.
That seems pretty counterintuitive.
All right. Besides welfare, one of the benefits could be food quality. And what we've seen when we looked at the results of all the research that's been done with eggs is that we've seen that feed and pasture composition is more important for product nutrient content than the housing system. What we feed the bird impacts the nutrient content of the eggs. They've been able to show that with pasture production, and there is an increase of omega-3 fatty acid content of eggs. Whether or not that is significant to human health is debatable, but we do know there is a change in the content. With meat, it's a little more complex because we are also looking at slow versus fast-growing strains in different housing systems, and with that we have different qualities of meat. But we do know that the nutrient content, just like the eggs of that meat, is associated with what the bird eats. However, we don't see any relationship with housing system. When we look at food safety, if we take eggs, our threat is biological in regards to salmonella, and no housing system will be better or worse than another in regards to salmonella. In those studies where there is a difference, and it's usually lower for free range, is because of floor eggs. Those are eggs that are not laid in the nest or are laid out in the pastures. They have a higher bacterial load on those eggs compared to other ones. And bacterial load is the most important thing. But one of the things we're also seeing with eggs is contamination from the chemical side. We have issues with pesticides, dioxin, and recently with lead. We had pesticides. We just have a system right now in Belgium and Netherlands where we have exposure to pesticides carried over into the eggs. The lead issue comes from reclaiming urban areas and using the birds there where they may have removed the building that had lead paint in it, the soil's been contaminated with lead, or the land may be close to a major thoroughway, and in the time before unleaded gasoline, that lead has deposited in the soil. So that's one of the issues that we deal with as we produce eggs in different environments. Meat, on the hand, is not only salmonella but Campylobacter. The risk factors are the same whether it's free range or conventional. It's the strain of the flock, the housing system. Control of rodents is the number one thing, cleaning and sanitation, and whether or not there's mixed stages on a farm can increase the bacterial load on meat. With both eggs and meat, it cannot be assumed that it's a safe product just because of the housing system. Whatever the system, proper handling of meat and eggs is essential to prevent foodborne illnesses. Another issue that comes up is poultry health. The optimum health is key to successful poultry production. Disease in a flock reduces the optimum productivity. The infection is that do not cause mortality, will impact the birds and reduce their vitality by reducing appetite, decreasing efficiency of nutrient absorption, disturbing the function of essential systems like the respiratory tract, the excretory tract, or the immune system. What most studies have shown is that there's increased mortality in the free-range production system compared to the conventional systems. In addition, free-range poultry are more exposed to certain external and internal parasites because they have access to wild birds and invertebrates that can serve as vectors to bring those external and internal parasites to the bird. So we do see free-range birds having increased incidence of some of those parasites. One thing that we are clear on is that there is no indication that the presence of a free-range poultry operation poses a risk to conventional poultry. So even though they're outside, they do not pose a risk to neighboring farms. Another point is the environmental impact. As with any any production system, waste disposal is the main concern, and how we manage waste. In situations where we're moving the situation, one would say you're spreading waste out. But in systems where there is no ground cover, we may actually increase the potential for pollution by having soil erosion. Same with any type of facilities, the type of animals, the efficiency of that animal, the quality of the feed, and the house itself influences the environmental impact. But what we are seeing is that because of the increased mortality that we have seen in some of the studies, the free-range production system compared to the conventional system may actually have a larger or increased environmental impact based on a per-bird basis, because that mortality is affecting the efficiency of the system. So mortality can impact all environmental impacts, including greenhouse gas emissions, the potential for eutrophication, acidification potential, pesticide use, and more importantly, the land. As we require more land for an operation, we increase the need for land that could be used in other agriculture. So the impact really depends on how good a management we are doing with our system. So, in conclusion, management is the key to optimizing animal welfare in any production system. When comparing conventional cages to other systems, the main conclusion was that no single housing system can be identified for being ideal for animal welfare. Each system has its own merits and challenges. Cage systems, which limit hen movement, can result in problems with osteoporosis. On the other hand, floor systems can result in more bone fractures. Although more space is allowed in the hens to provide a wider repertoire of behaviors, it also increases in detrimental behaviors such as feather picking, cannibalism, and piling. Production systems in which the hens are exposed to litter and or soil provide greater risk for disease and parasites. Thus, although the perception may be that animal welfare is increased in free-range production systems, this may not be the case with all operations. Providing the outdoor access leads to higher space allowances, an increase in the number and type of behavioral and physical simulations, and the freedom to move to different environments with changes in climatic conditions and bird preference. Based on these criteria, one can assume that there is an increase in animal welfare. It is important to note, however, there are also increased risks associated with bird welfare. This includes increased contact with infectious agents, greater difficulty in maintaining hygiene standards, increased possibility of unbalanced diets, and increased threat of predation. In regards to food quality, the main conclusion that we could make is that nutrient composition of poultry products is more effective, more reflective of what the bird eats rather than the type of production system. Outdoor access itself does not alter the nutrient content of the product. It does, however, appear that the nutrient content of poultry meat and eggs are enhanced with the access to pastures and the effects depending on the type and quality of pasture provided. In regard to food safety, comparing results between systems is difficult between the differences in geographical locations and seasons and detection and isolation methods. Food safety can come down to the bacterial load on the product. The major concern has been husbandry, sanitation, and rodent control. Most differences are due to floor eggs laid outside the nest. Chemical contamination has been due to existing chemicals in the soil or illegally applied compounds. There's little documentation of research with regard to the disease risks associated with free range as compared to conventional poultry production. It's documented that free range poultry has more exposure to certain external and internal parasites because of access to invertebrate and wild birds. Although free range poultry may be more vulnerable to certain diseases, there are no indications that the presence of free range poultry pose a risk to conventional poultry. And the research regarding environmental impact of different production systems are in conflict. If high mortality occurs, there will be increased environmental impact, and reduced productivity will increase the environmental impact on a per bird basis. More importantly, as these systems require more agricultural land, it becomes more difficult to place these facilities. Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
When you're talking about food safety, did you look at all in terms, I think of sort of food availability, that clearly if you've got a higher mortality, you're using more land, or it's taking you longer to raise birds, the cost of that is going to go up. Was cost a factor in any of your, for the consumer?
When you start looking at any system that requires a change like that, you do have increased costs, whether it's associated with the management or the housing or the labor involved. And in order for free range to be profitable, you require a premium for it to be in there.
Yeah. That wasn't part of what you were looking at specifically, though?
No.
When you talking about the land use and environmental impact, using more land, was there consideration? Is there less land needed for feed?
Feed is not that. When you start looking at the utilization by a bird for a pasture, they are not a ruminant or an animal that can utilize pasture. They will consume some of it. They may be able to supplement up to 10% of their diet with something. But a lot of that supplementation is due to insects. But what you'll see with pastures, and we've done this study, is we've looked at what bugs are out on a pasture, and it's so seasonal and so variable within a season, it cannot be a dependent source of nutrients.
So I still need
They still need feed, exactly.
Speaking of
There
pastures,
aren't any vegetarian chickens.
We try to make them that.
We try.
We try. Everything's wants to be fed in an all-vegetarian diet.
The report where it talked about food quality and the higher omega-3s, there was a certain amount of qualifier in terms of the quality and type. It was very much dependent upon the quality and type of the pasture. You might talk a little bit about what are some of the specific conditions that the pasture has to have before you see a significant bump up in that omega-3 content.
Obviously, there's lots of different pastures in the world. Alfalfa, clover, good quality pastures like that will have the precursors for omega-3s as part of their consumption. However, when you have mixed grass hay or you have no ground cover, you're not going to have those things available. So it's very variable depending on the quality of that pasture.
The other thing too, you hit on a little bit, but when you were talking about the animals' reaction to fear and the differences between how the animals who went outside reacted to the animals who stayed inside. But I remember reading a report that the percentage of animals in a flock that tend to go outside versus tend to stay inside, there was, at least I noted, a general propensity of more of those animals to stay inside and that those actually going outside was a relatively small percentage. Is that
Right, we're talking about outdoor access. The birds have a choice. And what you're seeing is there's a fear factor, because when you think about it, if they go outside, there is unknown, there may be predators, and they don't know what's going out. So we talked about in there about transitional zones as well as enhancements that get birds to use the free range. And the other side is, if you were a chicken and you were inside and it was comfortable and you had all the feed you could eat and all the water you can drink and you had your friends, the only thing you don't have is a video game. Why do you want to go outside? And that's one of the things that needs to be studied. If we're really worried about them going outside, what needs to be done to make them go outside on their own?
Which then increases their stress if they didn't want to go outside.
If they, exactly, if they don't want to go out,
Yeah.
you know.
You were talking about the fact that there hadn't been much research on meat birds. One of the things that concerns me is this effort to talk about the fact that fast-growing, we have 100 chicks at home right now, so, and they will grow fast, and it's wonderful. And the effort to sort of steer consumers away from these birds that are going to grow quickly, when in fact, it seems to me that a lot of the issues that you've raised in terms of how much land is used, how much food is used, feed for the animals or whatever, should in fact move some consumers in a different direction. And I don't see those animals as being uncomfortable at all. I mean, they eat, they wander around, they sit, they do their thing, and they're chicken tractors, so, yeah, they're on, moved around.
We can do a good job raising chickens with the genetics we have. As we go to slow growing birds, we have a very big issue because it requires more time.
Yeah.
It requires more feed, and the yield of the bird is not the same.
And the price goes up.
Well, the price will have to go up because those slow-growing birds do not yield the breast meat that the commercial broiler does.
Right.
So the efficiency of the whole system goes out. So if we were looking at, if you're looking at slow-growing birds, you're talking about maybe 97% increase in the number of poultry houses that are needed. Along with that, that means there's X number of birds that are utilized, and they have to have increased feed, and they have to have more birds go to the processing plant. That increases truck traffic, and it's unbelievable how big of an impact it has on the environment and sustainability when you don't utilize the genetics we have available.
Yeah. And I think,
If we're just
I
talking,
think that kind of study would be helpful in terms of being able to provide that to consumers who, want, more what they think of as natural birds, when in fact, it's counter to most of the things I think they're really concerned about.
actually, I have that thought in my bag.
Okay.
Well, I think sometimes, this idea, some of these trends get kind of caught up in the sustainability. People equate it with sustainability, but yet the modern, fast-growing, high-producing, high-efficient, if we're really talking in terms of, net amount of input needed to produce a given amount of output, the more efficient the system is, in theory, the more sustainable system. But there seems to be at least a consumer disconnect with that concept where they want to kind of go back to,
It gets very emotional.
yeah.
It is, and it's,
And people are 5 generations away from raising their own food. They don't even have an oral history anymore of raising their own food.
and what's happening is that,
I'm sorry.
No
I got
problem.
into my other event.
no problem.
All right, I don't
I got
want
one
to.
right
No, that's fine.
It's a great conversation.
Got it.
But one of the things that's happening is that we look at Europe and they say, oh, they're raising, 70% of their birds are slow growing now. Well, that 70% of their birds is 10% of their consumption. The other 90% is coming from Brazil.
That's.
So it's one of those things where you have a gourmet bird that they're getting a premium for, but it's 1 out of 10 chickens that they're consuming.
Yeah.
It's just like a consumer that goes to a farmer market and they have the best farmer in the world, the Amish farmer from wherever they are. They buy that chicken, they feel good about that chicken, they cook that chicken, they bring over their dinner mates, and they have a wonderful chicken dinner. And they pay $12 a pound or whatever. However, the rest of the week, they ate 5 times at a fast food restaurant, had regular chicken. They stopped at the grocery store and got a rotisserie chicken. And then Sunday, they stopped and went and got Kentucky Fried Chicken. So they use chicken 100 different ways in a month, but they remember that chicken they paid $12 for.
No, it's the experience. I mean,
Exactly.
I work here, but I live in Maine and we have a farm and we raise poultry and pigs and goats for meat for market. And, I mean, one of the things that, and I work ag policy here, so one of the things that is really important to me is that the entire range of production be available and supported. Because people that spend $4.50 a pound for our chickens, which is what it costs, that's great, I'm glad they do it, and it allows us to have business, but I also know that there are lots of families that need much less expensive chicken, and that has to be available as well,
Right.
and we've got to be supportive of all of those different things, and it's frustrating sometimes to sort of push back on consumers and say, well, I'm glad you're doing this, but it doesn't mean that other kinds of production are bad, it just means that we're small and we do it differently. And it's just, that's part of the reason I want to be down here, it's just a real frustration that somehow we've got to get more of this kind of information